Greetings, Doc John here, and I am the Entrepreneurship. Welcome to the channel. Today, I have a special guest, Krishna Venigalla, a social entrepreneur and the founder of Impactive, here for Founder Stories. Krishna, welcome to the channel.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm Krishna. With Impactive is my company, and I've always been interested in building global awareness and global competency within people because I've moved around a lot in my life, and I faced a lot of difficulties when I was younger where people weren't really understanding where I was coming from, or, even in schools that I went to, I felt like I was, kind of not isolated, but it was definitely a tough time because there was, some places I went, there was a lack of diversity, and, it was just a very, I think, a tough thing that people didn't understand what even global competency meant and what that entails into a young person's life. And it's a very a particular thing that people don't talk about as much, but it actually influences a lot of the things and how we behave, how we are just active citizens in our community and the things we do. So then once in college, I started doing more research on education. In high school, I was very passionate about education because, young people are really what drive those decisions in the future and really build the next generation of more globally competent people. So I started doing more research on education and then tying that into global competency and then civic engagement. And all those key terms kind of came together for me. And I was like, well, what is the best way to execute something like that? What is the best form of, a business that can help me achieve that vision of a more cohesive and understanding youth that come together and connect from around the world, and came up with Impactive, which is a network that we can connect groups and individuals around the world. And when I say groups, it can be classrooms, it can be professional groups. So we can all, basically people can connect to build global competency, learn from each other. And it's almost like a Tinder for, helping people connect, but it's not dating. It's not, it's not completely even professional. It's a very civically minded platform where people are filling out their causes, their interests in the world that provides meaning to their lives. So there are times when I'm like, is there really a problem? And I've had to ask myself that so many times. And it's tough because when you have a bigger vision, you're like, it's not a problem-based vision. It's just more of a way you want to transform the world, or the way what you want to see in this world. That maybe then you're like, okay, well, other people want to see it the same way. So when it comes to the problem, for me, it was, I knew that especially in the classroom education, things were not right. I always felt passionate about the education world. And I realized that students weren't happy. They weren't happy with their experiences in school, the way that we've been so driven in terms of our academics with grades, and the real life experience was kind of missing. And then I also found that there are tools within companies and there are networks within companies that care about so many things in this world too, but not everyone has the resources or ways to help. And so I was like, well, why don't we connect all these people? Why don't we get people together to do something good together? And I've always been a connector. So I did see a problem. I just didn't really, it was such a big problem. It's like you almost have to bring in 50 different parties to really make this work. And I knew that was really hard, but I wanted to do it. And so that's what I am doing. And sometimes it's like, well, is that a problem or just something that you want to change in the world? And it's like, well, those two things align, because that problem is what I want to solve, but it's not something you talk about in your everyday day in, day out. It wasn't a day in and day out kind of problem. It wasn't like, oh, I need something better to put my toothbrush in. It was so, and that's okay too, if you want to build that. But but it's just like, I think that was the hardest part, but I've gotten better at explaining that to people. And they're like, well, yeah, I know somebody who was feeling this way, or I know somebody who did this, or who dropped out of school because of so and so. Like, there were so many like people, it might not be them necessarily, but these problems do exist on a wider basis. It's ultimately bringing these people together to do something greater, and that's through a lot of civic engagement. And now within the last year, we've seen a lot of barriers to how people can civically act on the things that they do care about, and how we can all kind of individually contribute, because not everyone is, it's not just about like donating your money. It's not just about like going to one campaign or something and then calling it a day. Big part of like what we're really building is impact profiles. So it's not just like you doing one thing here or there. It's like, how can you integrate these causes and build people around the things you care about? And by connecting people, we realize, well, that's like a big part of it. Like, you can find solutions that people are doing all the way in Zambia, and then you can apply that to your own life and situation. And it's just, there's so many things that in this world, like, we don't know enough of yet. And if we just shared that knowledge, things would be so much better. A lot of problems would be solved. And I wrote this exact thing that I'm telling you right now on a PowerPoint in 9th grade. So it is something that it took some time to build to get to the solution point. But ultimately, by being able to use this platform, people are able to better connect and solve issues. So that's really the gist of it. And, I've been trying to also make sure I keep things simple, and it is pretty sweet and simple, but I tend to kind of drag things on too. So when you're creating your organization with like what you're trying to say, I would definitely recommend like keeping it more concise, and just, when people have questions, they will ask you questions, but make sure it's like very clear. I'm still really working on that right now, because I tend to kind of, when you're passionate about something, you want to keep going about it, and you love talking about it. You want to explain it in 10 different ways and make people get it. But just when you're doing these, the business canvas models, like whatever it is, just keep it short. Like, look at the key points that you're really trying to reel in on, and just write those things down and focus like on one or two things at the beginning, and do that. So I originally didn't know if I was going to start. I wanted to, originally the whole idea was to just start with classrooms. And then one of my mentors, like we had this one session where we were just kind of talking about, it was my team at the time, and we're just kind of talking about like what's really best for where we're going, what's a need that needs to be filled. And then we kind of went off on this random tangent about how it could be beyond classrooms and it could be so much more. And it was very much true. And that's what I'm tailoring this platform to make sure that in the future I can do that and do it easy. But I'm still focusing on classrooms, and I'm still focusing on the education world, because that's something I'm most passionate about. It's a whole different kind of niche, and it's very broad. It's like a network, but finally came to, we're almost completing the MVP, and we're going to start getting people to try it out. So that's a little bit about me and Impactive.
Could you tell us the story of when you originally came up with the idea of Impactive, and just really your journey in this early stage development of this social venture?
I think for me, the inspiration kind of started from something that was just meaningful to me since I was younger. And that's a big part of what inspired me to do what I'm doing. But at the same time, not everyone has that kind of like niche right away. And it's like, well, I want to, be an entrepreneur, and I want to do something greater than myself. And that's where a lot of people come from, but they're just unsure. And so things like that are really good when you're just trying to break down, like you're like, okay, well, I have maybe an interest in, yes, being an entrepreneur, starting a business. And the next step is like, well, what niche and what place am I going to focus on in the world? Like, what problem am I going to solve? And so once you figure out that particular thing, then breaking things down would be important, because when you start, if you start doing those kinds of activities when you have no idea where you're going, then I feel like it doesn't organize, it just scatters things even more. But once you kind of have your niche and you're like, okay, well, this is an area that I'm really passionate about. And then you start breaking down, okay, what are problems in this area? What are things that I personally have faced in my life or have been interested in? Then you start jotting all those things down and you can very clearly see those. But an activity, like something that always helps me is just having a blank slate, like a whiteboard, and maybe even like a room with all whiteboards. And I just start like writing down my ideas, and I just like focus in on just exactly what I'm trying to do. And then find some like target questions maybe that are just like using like the business like, Canvas, like there are some questions and some key terms there that you could kind of be like, go step by step and be like, okay, so the first question I'm going to tackle, or the first point, is about maybe the customer. And then maybe the customer is different than the user. And you start understanding all of these things when you start like breaking it down. And then having people next to you as well that are really good at doing that already or have experience is actually really nice. But don't do that the entire time you start to brainstorm, organize. Like have it be like, okay, can you join me for like 15 minutes in my brainstorming session, or 30 minutes, and then have the time to yourself to do and brainstorm and think through things too. So, figure that out for yourself and who those mentors or those industry professionals, whatever it is, are.
So could you tell us a little bit about the inception of Impactive and how you really began as you proceed through the early stages of development for this social venture?
Yeah, so I've always been very interested in research. So it kind of came easier to be able to do research in the social aspect of things and then connect it into my startup. And then a lot of the classes, I built my major around global development and sustainability. So it all kind of tied into I was kind of living and breathing what I wanted to do in this world, right? Everything that I did, I wanted to kind of tailor it around what I wanted to build. And I would recommend doing a similar thing. And it might sound kind of like not obsessive, but if you want to achieve something, obsess over it. And if you want to achieve that particular dream and what you want to do in this world, obsess over it and do it right. So that's where it kind of started for me, where I started to kind of wrap all my experience, everything around building my knowledge about about young people, education, classrooms, and how that ties into other parts, like other disciplines, which include like business and policies and areas. Like when it comes to development, all these are like a big part of, just development in rural areas or otherwise. So that was where it started. And then building the actual product was, I think, the hardest thing, because when it came from that, like you're going to always have 50 different people telling you 50 different things. And just know that you might feel a little bit torn sometimes. You're like, okay, well, one person's like, don't build a product or don't build anything. Yeah. One person is like, you should just do it. And then the other person's just like, well, do this, this, and that before. And then somebody's like, no, do this, this, and that before. And so it's always, you should know in your gut what you think is the most valuable thing for you in that moment. And getting input and advice is something that I've gotten. I'm one of those people who like almost doesn't take a step forward sometimes without getting that input. and it's always been valuable. But before, like when we're first building the MVP, I didn't have all the right resources, because if I did, then I think I would have just gone ahead and be like, all right, let me just build out something from scratch. Like if I could develop myself, or if I could do something myself, but I couldn't. So building it took money, and it took resources that I found a mentor who was very, very, I was very fortunate to have, that mentor support me. And then I kind of like built my network of mentors and people that were really supportive of the whole vision. And then from there, we found developers, a couple contract developers, because you can't always find the perfect and most amazing team right from the start. But I did have a design lead, so prioritizing was really important. As I said earlier, like what did I have to do in that moment? I started to, try to bring on people that were in the business world, or like other parts. And it was not necessary at the moment. They couldn't even do anything. So I ended up not having them as a part of my team moving forward. It wasn't a bad, like, it wasn't anything negative. You got to kind of make decisions for what's best for your company at the time. And I ended up reconnecting with one of my old friends who was a design lead in the industry. And he ended up liking what we were doing. And he's a big part of like building the product. So from the beginning, it was just figuring out like, what did I have to do right in that moment to achieve, like go from A to B, right? Point A to point B, and then point B to C, like always just think about it from those little steps. And I sometimes was like, wow, this picture is so big and I don't even know where to get started. So don't overwhelm yourself with that type of mindset, because it's never going to be beneficial. Start at point A and figure out what exactly you need to get to do to point B. And that's something my dad has always said too. Like, he's just like, just do it. Like, what are you waiting for? So it was a lot of bootstrapping. Figure out your resources. They're always there. You just got to talk to people. You got to figure out who's also interested, and you will find it. If you look hard enough, you will find it.
What did you learn along the way, and what's some advice that you would give to aspiring social entrepreneurs like yourself?
Honestly, it took a lot to get to where we are now with actually building out this MVP. I would definitely recommend that if there is something, an idea or anything that you have, just really building out something that's a basic version, right? And if you can't do a basic version, you don't have the tools yet to do something that you can build out and be tangible. Some people have services, or some people have, it's not always a product, but in that way, you could start to basically test certain things out. Like, for example, what I did before even building out that MVP was I went and worked with classrooms before that. And connecting classrooms, I saw how much joy was, in these young like kids' faces. Like, it was amazing to see what they've learned from each other just from 4 sessions. I did research in Zambia. So I basically connected those students with my own high school, some students from my own high school. And it was just a very, very eye-opening experience for a lot of people to even see that, but not everyone gets to see that. And just having that itself was really important in kind of figuring out, okay, from there, what's important into building the MVP. And a big part of that was also like civic engagement, which is really the cornerstone of like why people are meeting up and why people are connecting. So that purpose is something we wanted to kind of fill, because it was lacking when we did some of the sessions with the students. So we started off by building something that can really empower civic engagement, and then kind of building from there to help connect classrooms. So really bootstrapping, like every entrepreneur has got to bootstrap at some point, unless, you just got money handed to you right from the beginning, which most people don't. So I would say I've gotten some amount of support, but for the MVP, like bootstrapping was really important, and it took a lot of people to believe in me. But I think it's up to you as an entrepreneur to make people believe you, and for a good reason, right? So once you start doing that, you will get unconditional support if your vision is clear and if what you want to achieve is clear. But don't get me wrong, when you're building the MVP, you don't want to always focus on the vision all the time, which is a mistake I've always made, because I get so caught up in what could be and I start to lose focus on what I need to do right now. So that's a skill that I'm still learning to master even more, but it's a mistake that I've made, which is like, wow, I want to do this amazing thing in this world. And I forget that, oh, wow, okay, I have to build this thing right now because we need to get users on it. Otherwise, I won't have a product. So the main thing was, what is it that I need to do to understand my the customers or the market itself, right? That's one thing that I'm still learning how to do better at. It's tough because when you have multiple markets, or when you're just like, where do I even go? I'm just now at this point, like even cold calling schools and going up to random schools and just like, it's stuff you got to do. And just, honestly, it sounds kind of like sloppy, but I think at the beginning, like it is what it is. And that the first point was about this point that I just said is about really getting to know your market even more. And then the second is, how do you satisfy that market? Obviously, that's why you're building your business, because you're satisfying something that is not filled or fulfilled. And so there are different ways you can do that. Obviously, you can, maybe yours is building a product. Maybe it's a service that you're offering. Maybe you're personally offering like consulting, like it could be absolutely anything, right? So prioritizing what it is that you have to do. And then also, how are you going to make money? That's, I say that because these are honestly points that I have struggled with the most, but are also the most important and the most difficult. So those 3 points are kind of very big for me right now, as a beginner level, just really getting started with what I'm building. But I would definitely say those are points that you can't just escape, and you'll never be able to escape from, because that's the purpose of the business you're building. I think even before building out something that's so official and you start getting more people on board, test it out. Like if you have it's almost like you have a hypothesis about something, and anything at all, right? You're going to need to test it out and then prove it. And if there's other people in the market that are already in the industry that are already proving it, then you figure out how they're doing that. So do your research about your competitors, about what's already being done, and then you'll start to understand, and if somebody's already doing it, it doesn't matter, you can do it better. If you think you can do it better, you figure out what are the first steps that they took in that particular industry, right? Just start somewhere and prove your point. That's all. Like, prove your point, and you're going to have mentors and people that support you because you've proved your point. So once you do that, then if you want to if it's a service, and you start offering that service. So just when I say just do it, that's when you just do it. And then you're like, hey, look, I've offered this service and here are 2 happy people. And that's all it takes. Like, you don't need 100 happy people right away. And no, like, people don't expect that from you. So if you have these 2 happy people, then great. Now you can move forward, because you're going to have people that then trust you. If you go to these events, if you go to places that you can connect with people in that niche, then once you have those 2 happy people, you say, hey, I have these 2 happy people, and this is something I know more people are going to need. And will you support me in so and so things? And then, you build your business from there.
Knowing what you know now and looking back, what would you do differently if you were starting today?
I think I would have done things sooner. I know that, like, it's a very interesting question, because as someone like who's at a place where they are somewhat happy with everything, I also, it's like, some people are like, well, I wouldn't change anything. I learned from every single thing. And it's like, yes, like you do learn from every single thing, but you can do some of those things even better moving forward. So for me, I've just kind of just dragged everything for a long period of time. Whereas like I knew from the start what I wanted to do, but I just didn't know how to properly do it. I ended up not even applying for jobs after graduation. I applied for a program that would further a fellowship that would further support what I was doing, but that was about it, because I knew that if this wasn't going to happen now, it's never going to happen, because my time is important for Impactive to succeed. And you need that mental space. So something that I also realized, and I kind of look back at this and I'm like, mental space is just really important for building your product or service in the best way possible, because your mental space as the main and the core entrepreneur is probably the most valuable thing. And this is something that people aren't going to talk about, because it's just like, wow, I'm doing so many different things and I take pride in just being super busy and crazy. But you got to have those moments where you just sit and you think about your business, you think about the next steps, or you think about exactly what it is with just peace. Like you just have to think with a very clear mind. And I've had a lot of blurriness in the past that kind of caused me to take not like be directed in the wrong way, but it was just a lot of like loops. Like I just kind of like kept going in circles, because something I would think, I feel like I didn't have the time to like act on, or I didn't like have the time to think further. And I would stop myself because I'm like, wait, I can't go on tangents about that in my head because I've got homework to do, or I've got this to do. So it literally takes like, sometimes you just have to literally block out an entire day to just sit and think. And I know it sounds kind of weird, but that's something I kind of wish I made more time to do, because if I did that, I think I would have been more clear in where I was, what I wanted to do, and I would have just done it. It's something that I think you have to build your believers with. It's not, I've been building this for so long that I'm very proud to have kind of built the people that do believe in me. And that's kind of where I got my initial support, being able to just see like who actually cares about what you're doing. And then ultimately those relationships and the funding will come. Like I had to build a lot of relationships. I did not expect money to come from any of those relationships. I truly just wanted to go for advice, and I wanted to go for support because of people that were more successful than me. And I think that was where it started for me. And then from then I kind of got some money to the beginning of the MVP. I obviously didn't need money to just go into a classroom and work with them. And, you just find your tools without having to put that money in first. And then from there, people will see that you've put in your work, you've done the legwork. And once they recognize that, you will know where to go for the money, if that makes sense. And you can go to family, friends, and figure out what kind of model you have, right? Like, are you going to be able to, if they invest, like, are you going to be able to guarantee them some amount of money back? Or is it something that if there are people out there that are honestly just willing to be supportive of you and the vision that you want to achieve? So find those people too, because they're rare, but they're there. And yeah, so it's a hard question. And then apply for competitions. I've just applied for so many that sometimes it gets a little frustrating when you fail so many times. But that also allowed me to just like fix up my applications, fix up everything, like every round, everything that I do. So there are just lots of ways to get money, but start with not having money and doing something with it. Then people are like, wow, if she didn't have money and she could do that, then what would happen if she had money to do what she wanted? So make people think that. And then that's when you know that you can do what you want to do and do it right when you have the money.
So Krishna, what's next for you and for Impactive?
I'm traveling around a bit right now. One, to just kind of understand like where I do want to settle down Impactive and just figure out like what I feel is a good environment for me to thrive in. So that's really where I'm headed. And I think where the ed tech industry too, I've a couple places in mind for sure. So it's just now like taking action with that and just kind of building my network in a certain place. So that's really important too. Like if you know that you're sitting here in Pennsylvania and you know that you're not basically surrounded by what you think will help you thrive and your company thrive or your mission, then do something else. Don't be scared to do that. It's a bit scary, but it's worth it, and it will be. And I can't prove that just yet, but I will tell you when I do.
So there you have it. Just some insight into what it's like to do early stage entrepreneurship and particularly social entrepreneurs. So let's keep going.